So as you get to the point where you can start looking at these things, it really is interesting what bubbles up to the top because often it's not what people are expecting to see. Uh, if
Yes.
somebody's throwing a CPU at a problem, if it's not CPU bound, suddenly they're paying a lot more for their licensing, not only for their CPU and for their hardware, but for SQL Server, because the SQL Server licensing is mostly CPU based these days, right? Core based.
hmm Right.
And
And it's even worse, actually, Jeff, if you're running on an Azure-based system.
mhm.
As you pointed out,
Oh yeah,
I shouldn't say Azure. I mean, any of the cloud providers, because there
yes,
you pay for consumption, not, that fixed cost of your server. So if you overspend on a server every 3 years, that hides a lot of, um, poorly coded SQL and things like that. But if
yeah,
you
and the
have a lot of
cost.
poorly coded SQL, you go to the cloud, you're spending a lot more money than you need to because you're using a lot more CPU, you're using a lot more storage, a lot more IOPS, and you have to pay for each of those according to how much you consume.
Yeah, and the other piece of that same puzzle is that uh, when you're getting ready to go to Azure or AWS or Google or whichever your cloud provider is, they often have tools that will run against your system and say, okay, Azure should cost you X amount per month. And when it comes in at triple that,
Mm-hmm.
you start scratching your head and going, were they lying to me or is something awry? And
Right.
and
Right.
I'm not going to give you the cynical answer to that one, but it's often because something is awry.
Yes.
So as we start looking at fixing performance issues, right? I know that my approach has changed a little bit over time. In the olden days, I would use the which queries are the worst and start fixing them. And worst queries not necessarily the one that are driving the users nuts first, but the one that's using the most resources. So if I've got a query that's running 50,000 times a minute and it's running in 1 second, the users are probably not complaining about it. But if you tune it down to 20 milliseconds, suddenly the load on the server is down a lot.